I'm Jacqueline Gelineau, and I'm joined here today with Leah Main, who's the NDP candidate for Vernon-Lake Country Monashee. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've been active in politics for more than 15 years,
Yes.
But during this campaign trail, what have you identified as some of the key issues facing your riding?
The big issues are housing, affordability, and the tariff and trade war that we're involved with the United States. This is a big factor that is creating a whole lot of uncertainty and anxiety in families and working people, in communities, and the NDP understands that we need to address that with some big actions and with some small actions.
Mm-hmm. Local to your community, what would those actions look like? What would you be advocating for, specifically in your area?
In my area, I'll talk about the Spokane Valley. I'll talk about how we connect to this riding, to the Vernon-Lake Country Monashee part of the riding. In the Spokane Valley, we are a strip of small communities that run south to north, connected by Highway 6, and then over from the cusp over to the Monashee, to Vernon, and down to Lake Country. So we have this huge variety of communities from Vernon, which is a small city or a big town, depending on how you look at it, down to the smaller suburban communities, and then to the rural communities, particularly from Lumbee over to Edgewood, Burton, the Cusp, and down the Spokane Valley. So the challenges really are a little bit different, and the solutions are a little bit different wherever you go. In the Spokane Valley, it's owner builders, it's small construction companies, and it is small municipalities that need support for building the infrastructure to put new houses on. As you get over closer to Vernon, and this hits on one of the really big parts of the NDP platform regarding housing, there's a lot of federal lands owned around Vernon and through Lake Country, actually. Those lands need to be freed up to build housing on. And one of the big forces that has kept housing away from being affordable is land prices. If we can free up federal lands, we eliminate approximately 33% of the cost of building a home. So we've taken a big step toward affordability there, and we would support co-ops, small builders, owner builders, a wide variety of types of approaches to building homes that are not necessarily dependent on the big, high-cost developers who then take their profits and go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that gives a sense of how we want to look at it, and not provide a one-size-fits-all, but look at the particular needs of each of the communities.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of tariffs, agriculture is an industry that's disproportionately impacted by tariffs. They're telling us that they're being hit on both sides of the border. What would you be advocating for if elected to help bolster the agricultural industry within your riding?
Okay, well, when I'm an MP representing the Spokane and Monashee and Vernon and Lake Country, I will be a voice for the agriculture community and agribusiness, as well as small regional and local food producers. The agribusiness, which is it's our grains, it's our seed oil crops and things like that, potatoes. It varies where you go in the country. They need some support to get that stability, so that they know when they plant their crops, they know there's going to be a market for it. So the way that we protect our dairy and egg producers by controlling the market and controlling the price gives the stability to those parts of the agricultural economy, and we need to be looking at that for the grain producers, which the Stephen Harper Conservative government sold off that marketing board, which is now owned by the Saudi Arabians instead of being owned by Canadians in a co-op venture. We also support the smaller regional and local agricultural endeavors, because these are critical to our ability to feed ourselves, literally. Many communities have farmers markets. These are not a small thing when you put them all together. They represent a significant number of people who are living mostly in disadvantaged communities, and by disadvantaged, I mean we don't have access to the same services. In Silverton, my hometown, we do not have access to the same agricultural supports that the agricultural businesses around Vernon and in Lake Country have. That needs to be rectified, and the NDP fully intends to rectify that. We also want to work with things like the organizations like Young Agrarians, which do land matching and mentor young farmers coming into agriculture. And this is, this is really important to having the certainty that our agriculture, our food production will be there. We're also looking at vertical farming, greenhouses, urban farming, and none of the other parties are really talking about that. They're saying we will support agribusiness, but agribusiness is only one part of our agricultural community, and it really is only one part of feeding ourselves. We also have situations like in British Columbia, we sell our apples at a discount to Washington and Oregon. And we buy their apples at prime prices, and in some grocery stores, you can't find BC apples. You can only find Washington and Oregon apples. We need those grow local, support local programs back as a way of supporting Canadian families and workers from some of the worst aspects of loss of jobs, insecurity of jobs that are happening in increasing numbers these days.
Another factor that really is impacting agriculture is climate change. And the, we've had heat domes, we've had droughts, we've had flooding, we've had fires. How do you balance the needs of industry resource extraction with the needs of the community who's been being impacted by climate change?
With great difficulty. It's not easy to pull all of these things together, but resource extraction must be done sensitively with concern for the local and regional impacts. We would like to see an east, west, north clean energy grid being developed. Not diesel-powered hydro for small communities in the north. We need to get better at green energy infrastructure. The Conservatives and Liberals are talking about a resource corridor through Canada. They only talk secondarily about talking with the communities and the Indigenous people and the First Nations and Métis communities through which this resource corridor would go. The NDP wants to start at the other end and talk with communities, find out what they need and how it will impact them, and build the corridor, which is a good idea, done properly, build the corridor from the ground up instead of from the top down.
And what would these green energy solutions look like for people who aren't,
Okay, so what we're talking about is hydroelectric power, where we build dams and then we channel the water through turbines to make greener energy. It's not like burning diesel fuel, which happens in many communities, particularly through Alberta, through the prairie provinces, and up north, where the communities are sometimes so isolated that that's their only option right now. Indigenous communities are leading the way in solar and wind power. We also have tidal power to look at, and the technologies behind these cleaner, greener sources of energy, the technology is improving all the time, just faster and faster all the time. What we need is a web of power producers, not just a linear set of connections. We need all of the types of power production to be used and connected to each other.
You mentioned, your riding that you hope to represent, it is very diverse. It's small communities, rural areas, and you have cities. One thing that really impacts a lot of folks in your riding is healthcare and access to it or lack thereof. We get press releases all the time. Emergency departments are closed. Places are short-staffed. What would you be advocating for if elected to ensure your constituents are having access to healthcare?
Okay. What I would be advocating for is the requirement that all healthcare delivery be done in accordance with the Canada Health Act, which is universal healthcare. So funding for this and the override, the umbrella legislation is a federal jurisdiction. Distribution and build out of the healthcare delivery system is a provincial and territorial jurisdiction that we have very little control over. But we do provide the money, the funding, and that funding needs to increase, and it needs to be made very, very clear to the provinces and territories that all of the healthcare delivery needs to be on a universal, not-for-pay model. I recognize that communities are struggling, and they all want to say, well, you're in government, your government, fix it. I'm not that part of the government. I can advocate, and I have advocated and demonstrated vehemently for better healthcare delivery in my community. Do not close our hospital. Do not close our emergency room, which has been closed, is only open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That has been for 2 years now, and it is still billed as a temporary closure. We need better accountability of the provincial and territorial healthcare delivery systems need to be more accountable to the federal government that has the overriding legislation.
Now, based on the most current polling, it's unlikely that the NDP are going to hold power over the country. I'm curious what you would be able to do if elected, if your party isn't in power.
So let's be honest about this. The chances of NDP forming government are pretty slim. But we proved over the last 10 years working with a Liberal government, particularly in the last term where we were working with a Liberal minority government, that we held a lot of power as the third party. We were able to work with the Liberals under an agreement, a confidence and supply agreement, where we would support them remaining in government in exchange for pharmacare, free contraceptives and diabetes medication, dental care, starting with people over 70, now people over 60 can access up to $1,700 a year of free dental care. School lunch program, $10 a day daycare, anti-scab legislation, and a whole lot of community support legislation that would not have passed if the Liberals were left on their own, and would not even have been motivated. We had to push. The NDP pushed that Liberal government to bring those programs in. And I don't think any family or working person would say, I don't need that kind of help. We can do without those programs, which is what the Conservatives are proposing. And even the Liberals are not committed to furthering those programs and further expanding dental care and pharmacare particularly. NDP can push. The NDP can be the conscience of Parliament.
Now, within your riding, you've been, stationed there for many years now. What is your favorite part of your riding, and maybe a place that you go to, find solace when you're not working in government?
Going out walking in the woods, going out and cross-country skiing. There are so many beautiful places right where I live. Mm-hmm. And I know there are beautiful places over in this side of the riding as well. My biggest challenge when elected is bringing the two sides of the riding together so that we feel like we're all part of the same riding, which is a challenge given that I have to cross a ferry and 2 mountain ranges to get from my home to Vernon. Mm-hmm. So it's a challenge, but it's everybody in British Columbia particularly thinks that they live in the most beautiful part of the world, and every one of them is right.
Well, thank you very much for joining me here today. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
It's been my pleasure.